Sophos Firewall version 20 MR2 brings significant enhancements to the backup restore process, making XG to XGS transitions simpler than ever. Today, I'll give you a look at these new enhancements as well as the all-new Backup Restore Assistant. I'll start by briefly outlining the new Backup Restore features in SFOS version 20 MR2. Then, I'll discuss the Backup Restore Assistant in detail, covering its key capabilities and the prerequisites for using it. I'll show you the Compatibility Matrix and Compatibility Check tool, which are resources designed to streamline your migration process. And finally, I'll conclude with a Backup Restore example. Let's start with a quick look at the enhancements to the Backup Restore process. First, we've created the Backup Restore Assistant to simplify migration. This is an interactive UI that displays physical interfaces for port mapping. I'll talk about the Assistant in depth shortly. Next, we've added wider backup restore compatibility, removing many previous limitations such as port constraints. For instance, you can now restore backups from a 6-port device to a 4-port device, and vice versa. Additionally, there are no restrictions on the number of port conditions when restoring an HA backup to a running HA cluster. Along with the broader backup restore compatibility, you can now create templates from a virtual appliance to use on any hardware or virtual model, simplifying repetitive configurations. The new assistant also allows you to migrate or shift interfaces and their linked sub-interfaces, such as VLANs, to different speed ports during network infrastructure upgrades. For example, you can shift a 10G port to a 40G port using the same hardware. Now, let's take a closer look at the Backup Restore Assistant. As mentioned, this is an interactive UI that displays physical interfaces for port mapping. Virtual interfaces like VLANs and aliases will migrate with their parent interface. For leg and bridge interfaces, the firewall automatically creates a leg or bridge on the target using mapped physical ports. Then, there are pseudoports. In the interactive port mapping, ports selected as Do Not Map will be created on the target as pseudoports to retain configurations. Optionally, pseudoports can be replaced and unbound as needed. Any unbound pseudoports are then deleted on the next device reboot. Several requirements must be met for the Assistant UI to appear. First, the Assistant is only supported on XGS series firewalls, virtual, and cloud appliances. Backups must be taken from deployments running SFOS version 19.5 MR4 or later, or version 20 GA or later. Lastly, restores must be done on devices running SFOS version 20 MR2 or later. Note, restoring older backups below version 19.5 MR4 is allowed on SFOS version 20 MR2 and later. However, the Backup Restore Assistant will not be present. Other enhancements I've covered are still applicable. We've created some helpful resources to help you check your migration compatibility. Make sure you refer to these before starting a backup restore. First is the Compatibility Matrix. You can see that all real-world migration scenarios are supported. For example, backups from XG, SG, or XGS desktop series hardware can be restored to desktop, 1U, and 2U models without restrictions on the number of ports. Backups from 1US appliances can be restored to XGS 126 and 136 models. Virtual form factor device backups can be restored to any model, including desktop, 1U, and 2U. Moreover, there are no longer port restrictions when restoring HA backups to a running HA cluster, as mentioned before. Also note that backing up and restoring from a wireless appliance to a non-wireless appliance is supported in SFOS version 20 and later. However, you must remove the wireless networks in the firewall before taking the backup. Additionally, we've created a Compatibility Check tool. Simply choose the appliance you're backing up from and restoring to, and you'll instantly know if this is compatible. Refer to the links in the description for more information about compatibility. Now, let's see the Backup Restore Assistant in action. In this example, I'm going to take a backup of an XGS 2100 and restore onto an XGS 136. I'll go to Network to show you the configuration. I have a few different interfaces configured, starting with a leg. It has 4 members as well as a VLAN over leg. There's a WAN port, 2 physical ports configured as LAN segments, and an alias interface. There's also a VLAN on the unbound port. Lastly, there's a cellular WAN enabled and a bridge port. Now, to take the backup of the device, go to Backup and Firmware and click Backup Now. Note the encryption password, which is needed when restoring to the target device. Once done, download the backup. Next, I'll switch over to the XGS 136 that I want to restore to and navigate to Backup and Firmware once again. Under Backup Restore, I'll click Choose File and locate the backup. I'll enter the encryption password and upload the backup. Enter the Secure Storage Master Key. Note, up to this point, the steps for backing up and restoring are the same as what you've seen before. However, once the SSMK has been entered, the Backup Restore Assistant will appear if all prerequisites are met. On the left is the device we've taken the backup from, and on the right is the device we're restoring to. All the ports present in that configuration are shown. Hovering over the icon will display the interface IP address information as well as the link mode. The labels reflect the different port types, such as this unbound port with a VLAN. Note, this list only shows the physical interfaces. Any VLANs will migrate automatically. Any pre-existing leg interfaces will use the same interfaces to restore on the target as well. In addition, if you have a breakout-capable device, the breakout ports will be shown. Now, on the right side, all available ports on the target device are listed. The default mapping has already been populated. In general, ports are mapped to an equivalent port to start. For instance, port 1 on the backup device is mapped to port 1 on the target. If the same port doesn't exist on the target device, the next available port will be selected. For example, port F1 is mapped to port 9. Now, you can change the port mapping as required. In this case, port F1 and F2 are no longer required, so I'll set these to Don't Map. In addition, I no longer need a VLAN on port 4, so I'll set that to Don't Map as well. I'm happy with this configuration, so I'll proceed to restore. Once the restore is complete, the device will reboot. Right off the bat, you'll notice the hostname has now changed to XGS 2100. To compare the configuration, navigate to Network. You'll see that all the same ports are mapped to the target. However, since we chose to not map port F1 and F2, pseudoports are created instead to retain the configuration. This is the same for the port 4 VLAN. Now, I'll customize my configuration further to remove the pseudoports. You can quickly identify pseudoports in a few different ways. First, the port name will have port replaced with pseudo. The port number will remain the same. Also, the status will be not available. I'll remove any pseudoport related configurations, starting with the leg. Next, I no longer need a VLAN on an unbound interface, so I'll simply delete this. Lastly, I'll unbind the management port, since it's no longer present in the system. Now, with all the pseudoport related configurations removed, all the pseudoports are now in an unbound state and have a status of not available. The final step is to reboot the device and all unbound pseudoports will be automatically removed. And just like that, the unbound pseudoports are gone. That completes our overview of the exciting new backup restore enhancements in Sophos Firewall. We're confident this will make your migration process easier than ever. I hope you found this useful. Check out the documentation for this tech vid in the description. For further assistance, view and post questions on community.sophos.com. And go to techvids.sophos.com for more great videos like this one. Thanks for watching.